Hey witches, Tiffany here on Bewitching.Bemused. Today, let's talk about self-initiations. While many traditions and most covens do have a form of an initiation ceremony or ritual that members and the entire group oftentimes will perform to bring somebody, uplift them from being sort of a novice, somebody who's studying, almost like an apprentice. They're not a full-blown member, but the initiation makes them one. Sorry, I'm avoiding using very specific terminology because many covens and traditions do have specific terms for when one is there practicing, studying, and then when they become a member, they have different titles. So please forgive me if that's a little jumbled. But there are a ton of reasons why a solo practitioner, an eclectic practitioner, or somebody who is dabbling, they haven't really found their path yet. They're maybe kind of leaning towards eclectic for now, but they might find something later on, why they might want to do a self-initiation on their own. Before we begin, I would like to discuss the difference between initiation and dedication. The two are very similar, and in regards to ritual purposes, sometimes the rituals for each one look almost exactly alike, but ultimately they serve different purposes. Yes, they both function as sort of a rite of passage, a first step on a journey, if you will. However, while an initiation is to make somebody a member of a group, a dedication is for a person to make a commitment. While initiations do often contain dedications, not all dedications are initiations. For the sake of simplicity, in this video, I will mostly only talk about dedications in regards to how they might work within or be incorporated into an initiation. Some things that are very important to note and that you will want to consider before you begin. Research your path. If you follow a very specific tradition, like I mentioned, a lot of them do already have their own very specific initiation ceremonies that you can do by yourself in some cases. In other cases, it does require a group. And sometimes it might just be like a loose template that you could follow or not follow. It just really depends on the tradition we're talking about here. I will touch on this several times throughout this video, but not every tradition requires you to self-initiate, so just keep that in mind. But if it is something that you choose to do, and if you do follow a very specific tradition, you might just want to do a little bit of research to see if they have their own initiation ceremony. Next, there is no need to rush. If you are brand new to the craft or to paganism or a specific tradition, give yourself some time to make sure that that is really what you want to initiate yourself into. If you're brand new and you're starting off with general paganism, you might later on find a very specific tradition that works for you. Now, that of course could happen at any time. You could be an eclectic for decades and then all of a sudden come across something that you just really vibe with, you fall in love with it, and you want to initiate into that. Now, there's no real issue with that. I'm not saying that you're going to get punished if you initiate into one thing and then you join another. And in fact, there are certain practitioners out there who have been initiated into multiple covens or multiple groups or multiple traditions. This is very, very subjective. I can't tell you what's right for you, what's going to happen in your future. But the reason I want to say just hold off, allow yourself some time and some breathing room to really settle into your practice and gain a really solid foundation of your beliefs before performing an initiation is because this should be taken seriously. Don't just do it on a whim like, I just started practicing 3 months ago and I think I'm going to initiate as this, because you might really quickly change your mind. And I'm sorry, but what is the point of an initiation ritual or ceremony at all if you're like, I know I did that last week, but this week I'm on to something new. Here we go. Just know that there is no need to rush. It might take you decades before you self-initiate. It took me a few years into my practice before I bothered to do it. And some practitioners go their entire lives without ever initiating into anything. Just think about it as you're making a type of promise. I have a similar opinion on making dedication to spirit, so here's the next section, making dedication to spirit. Relationships with spirit, whether you are talking ancestors, a deity, the fae, even if you want to talk about like a whole general pantheon versus a specific god or goddess, often function like any other relationship in your life. If you make a vow to dedicate yourself to somebody, let's use the example of a marriage vow. Would you feel that it is acceptable to, at any time, just ghost that person with no notice? No. At least I certainly hope not. Would you feel that it's just like perfectly fine that like you just kind of like start slacking off, you're never giving, you're always taking? Again, I hope not. But of course, the vast majority of us would also never make a marriage vow without spending a really decent chunk of time getting to know that person, often spending years doing so. So why would you make a solemn dedication of yourself to an entity without extensive research and at least a little bit of time spent maybe already kind of building a little bit of a relationship with them and working with them a bit, seeing what you can give, what you can take, where does our balance lie, what is the communication like, just getting to know how that feels, how that addition feels in your life. Why would you just promise yourself over to serving them, worshiping them, providing offerings when you haven't spent that much time getting to know them? I'm not saying don't dedicate to spirit. I'm just saying don't rush into it. It's not something that you should necessarily take lightly. Next, don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not talking about, okay, promising to do your best to protect nature, and then suddenly you get a job that's 40 miles away and you are commuting to and from on your bike every day. I don't even know how much time that would take just to keep that promise that you're gonna do your best to protect nature. You'll go crazy. I just mean that it is really easy to go into the craft and make promises with these idealistic expectations of yourself and these idealistic expectations of how the world works and how magic works. You know, swearing that you'll never use magic for harm and always use it for good only. You'll only use it to manifest love and light. Or you'll never use it for selfish purposes or, you know, personal gain. If you're a fan of the original Charmed series, you'll only ever use it to improve the lives of other people and the world around you. Those are just some examples, of course. Do they all sound perfectly lovely? Yes, they do. Do they sound realistic? No. I'm not saying it's impossible to do that, but why would you limit yourself? And why would you put that limitation on yourself without really giving yourself an adequate amount of time to explore what you're capable of and what magic is capable of? It's really easy to say, I'll never cast a spell that could influence or affect another person. And it's much harder to actually do, because that's another thing that you sort of learn along the way are the consequences of your actions. Because I could also argue the fact that there is no magic that doesn't affect another person. Just like there are very few actions that you can make in life, just mundane everyday actions that don't impact other people. I'm just saying it's rarely a good idea to speak in absolutes. So don't make a promise that you can't keep. All right, let's move on to some fun stuff of designing your ritual. Now, yes, you probably came here hoping that I might give you like a step-by-step guide. Not really. I'm going to give you more of a loose template. And if you're curious, yes, this is also going to be on my website. It, again, isn't step-by-step, but I know that, you know, seeing it in written format can make it a little bit easier to kind of keep track of what you need to keep in mind when you're designing your ritual. That's a little bit easier than rewinding a video and so on. So that'll be linked down below in the description box. The reason I'm not giving you a step-by-step guide on this, and I will give you several examples of different initiation rituals that I have had friends tell me about, so you get an idea of how vastly different they can be. But the reason I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do this, I'm only going to offer suggestions and my personal opinion, is because there is so much variation, and this should be something that is super unique to you. This is a deeply, deeply personal ceremony. And so if you are not following a specific tradition that outlines a specific ritual, I highly recommend don't just go with your regular run-of-the-mill template. Come up with something yourself and make it special for you. Before you begin, there's a few things that you need to stop and contemplate about your beliefs and about your practices and about what you want to get out of this ritual. And the first question is, what do you want to get out of this ritual? What is the purpose of it? Usually when you would perform a spell or a ritual, you have a very specific intention. So this one, yes, you might have something that's very specific, but you might find when exploring your feelings, the reasons you feel the need, the pull to perform the self-initiation are a little bit less concrete. So it could be as simple as, I want to make a promise to myself, hold myself accountable to my practice, to my spirituality, keep myself going. It could be to express your wishes and your goals in regards to your magical practice and or your spirituality through ritual form. It could also just be to initiate yourself as a member of the worldwide magical community. Next, what are you promising? Is it to use your magic wisely and only for personal growth? Again, don't rush into promises you can't keep. Is it to use your magic to help others as well as yourself? That's a little bit more realistic. Is it to strive for personal growth? To improve the world around you as well as your own life? To incite terror and chaos in the world around you? Either way, this should reflect your personal beliefs, the general direction that you're headed, and what you hope to achieve by following this path. Next, who is this ritual being delivered to? This is for yourself, of course, but is there someone or something that you're hoping is listening? If at all, this could just be nobody. It's just for my own sake, and that's perfectly fine. Especially if you're somebody who is new to the path, you might have no clue, and that's perfectly acceptable. Or you might be more of an agnostic like me, and you're kind of like, I don't really know who's listening, but just whoever hears it, it's more for me and whatever. I know that I really felt like it was just my initiation into the wider magical and pagan community was more real and more concrete once I ritualized it and said it aloud. But perhaps whether you're making a dedication or not, you have a deity or a group of ancestors you would like to ask for guidance as you continue down your path. Or perhaps you want them to oversee your initiation as well as your journey in order to form a sort of accountability. Finally, who or what are you dedicating yourself to, if anyone or anything at all? As previously discussed, this is both not a requirement, and I also do not recommend dedicating yourself to a deity or spirit if you are very new. However, you might want to consider making a dedication to something like your higher self, or a more general, the universe, or the all, or kind of generalized higher power without placing names on things. Or of course, if you're a nature worshiper, then it might be nature. And of course, it doesn't have to be a who necessarily. It could also be more of a dedication to a concept or a set of principles. All right, let's get to the actual designing part now that you've self-reflected and considered all of that. The first thing you're going to do is write your statement of intent. Whether it will ultimately be your style to chant it aloud, to just repeat it over and over again in your head, to sing it, or simply write it down on a piece of paper and burn it. It can be long, it can be short, it can rhyme or not. It can be bullet pointed, it can be written in any language that you choose, as long as it's one that you are relatively fluent in. It is your statement, so how you write it and how you deliver it is entirely up to you. I would just highly recommend those questions that I just asked you, that I just had you reflect on, work those into it. Talk about, what are you vowing? What are you promising? What are you dedicating, if you're dedicating anything? And to whom? What is the purpose of this ritual? What do you want to get out of this ritual? And so on. Just really personalize it. Again, I don't want to tell you like, write this, then write that, then write that. I think this should be really dependent upon what you want to get out of an initiation, ritual, or ceremony. Next is to choose a time that is meaningful to you, both a day and time of day or night. I chose to perform my self-initiation on Samhain, not only because Samhain speaks to me in a lot of ways, but I also wanted that symbolism of death. I was letting something go, leaving it in the past, and moving on with something new, as well as the energy of the witch's new year. So again, moving into something new. And I actually waited a couple of years because I wanted it to line up on a Samhain that had a full moon, because lunar energy is very impactful in my practice. A friend of mine did his at sunset on his late mother's birthday. Trust your gut on this, whether you would like to perform yours on your favorite Sabbath or on a Sabbath that you feel represents symbolically a lot of what you are either letting go of or wanting to achieve with this or with pursuing your new journey. You might want to do it on an eclipse or during a particular moon phase or something linked to astrology. It might be your birthday or a particular day of the week that corresponds with a deity that is important to you that you work with. Select a day and a time that you feel a personal, powerful connection to. And again, there's no need to rush this. If you feel like the best time, your instincts are all telling you the best time to do this is on Ostara, because Ostara represents new beginnings, but Ostara just happened and you gotta wait a full year, then okay, you wait a full year. That's just what you do. Don't worry, it's gonna be okay, and that gives you a full year to plan it out anyway. Next, set the atmosphere. Again, this is very, very, very personal. It can be as simple or as extravagant as you like. I performed my self-initiation on my balcony, completely sky-clad at night with incense and candles lit, and I had way too much rose oil on my skin. I mean, it was perfect for me, but after the fact, like, I could not get rid of that smell for a while, and I did have to give rose oil a break for a bit. I wanted to use music, but I opted to skip it because it was pretty late at night, again, out on my balcony, and I didn't really want to draw the attention of my neighbors. I recommend using decor, clothing, sounds, scents, and items strategically in order to build up the atmosphere and get yourself into the right headspace. You want a headspace that makes you feel as witchy as possible, as powerful and as magical as possible. Not only will this help to naturally raise and enhance the energy of the space that you're performing this in, but also this is a type of celebration. So you should really consider like you're going all out as if this is a kind of party. Similar to that is this next section, which is to make use of meaningful tools, ingredients, and actions. During my initiation, I did keep this portion pretty simple. That's just kind of what my gut told me to do. And candles had always been important to me, both in my practice, but also just I've always loved candles. So I used a candle lighting it as a signifier that the initiation has begun. And then once I was done with my ceremony, I let it continue to burn all the way down, sort of symbolic for the initiation is done, the ceremony is done, but the effects of it are continuing on. I also set out symbols of each of the 4 elements to represent nature, and because the 4 elements have always played a big role in my relationship to paganism as well as magic. A friend of mine chose to dance for a very lengthy period of time as her initiation because she used that to raise energy. She also used it as a form of physical expression of her statement of intent, as well as a form of self-sacrifice, sort of using that exertion, that physical exhaustion as a means of sacrificing something as an offering, which I'll touch on in a little bit. I had another friend who used twine to make a witch's ladder throughout his entire initiation ceremony. He tied a knot for each section, each kind of bullet point of his statement of intent, sometimes working in charms or little items into each knot, and that sort of like solidified. It took what he was saying and sort of making it concrete, absolute on a material level. Years later, he still uses this cord as part of his ceremonial garb for large rituals. This is going to be a major chunk of your initiation, and I honestly cannot tell you how to perform it. Again, it can be simple or it can be extravagant. I just recommend you think about what each of these ingredients and tools and actions symbolize to you. How do they play into your practice and your beliefs and what you're trying to get out of this initiation? As you can see from those examples, the manner in which you can do this portion of the initiation, which is a major chunk of it, varies widely and is deeply personal. You know what calls to you. You know what parts of your practice you feel are the most impactful and important to you so far. You know what your instincts are telling you and what feels right. It might take some time to think on it. You might have a bunch of different ideas that you gotta kind of weigh the pros and cons of each one, or see if you can work multiple ideas together. Or yeah, it might just be a little bit harder and you need to spend some time self-reflecting, but hopefully those questions I gave you earlier maybe started you off on the right track of what you need to consider. Just think about how you can now commit those both symbolically, but also in a manner that works for you. So you may not want to work with candles at all, any sort of candle magic, if candle magic isn't really your thing. Listen to your intuition. Look at what works within your practice and follow that. Next is optional, but consider making an offering. If you are making a dedication, or if you are asking spirit of any form for assistance or guidance, either right during this initiation ritual or along your path, you might want to consider making an offering. This could be an easy material offering of food or drink, burning of incense, something like that, whatever they like. It could be a sacrifice of some form. Like I mentioned earlier, I have that friend who she used self-exhaustion as a form of self-sacrifice for her initiation. You could also give something up for a temporary period of time or offer a type of service. Once again, don't make promises you can't keep though. And of course, this is entirely optional whether you are doing a dedication or not. And finally, fill in the blanks. I can't really tell you if you should cleanse your items in your space first, or if you need to open sacred space, or cast a circle, or call on the quarters, because that's very subjective to each individual's practice. As you are designing your ritual, you will find that there are a lot of little details to fill in here and there. Do you want to have decoration or not? And if you do, what decoration should it be? What does this symbolize? What corresponds with this thing that you really want to incorporate, and so on? That's all stuff I cannot tell you. But again, don't rush this. If it takes you a few weeks or a few months or a few years to design the closest to perfection you can get for this ritual, then so be it. It's so important, and it's meant to be for you. It's meant to serve you. There's no point in rushing through it, making it sloppy, and kind of regretting things later. There will be so many little decisions, so fill in the blanks as you go. Just make sure that it is true to your instincts, to your beliefs, and to your practices. All right, whether you have done your initiation for the first time recently, or if it was decades ago, how did it go? What did you do? Or if you opted to not do an initiation, why not? Tell me all about it in the comments below, and I will see you all next week.